Class is now in session. I am Professor Hockey, and today we will be recapping the final day of the NHL play-ins. I guess you could technically call it Day 9, which featured only a single game, at least a single elimination game, between the Maple Leafs and the Blue Jackets, the only series to have gone the full 5 games. Every other series either went 3 in the case of the Hurricanes and the Rangers, or in the case of the other 6 series, went to 4 games. And this series was pretty back and forth and also quite different in terms of how the teams played through each game. The first couple of games were quite uneventful, pretty defense-focused. The first one was a 2-0 shutout by the Blue Jackets. The second one, the Maple Leafs got their revenge with the 3-0 shutout. And in Game 3, it looked like the same thing would happen. The Maple Leafs had the 3-0 lead, but it would be the Blue Jackets who would slowly but surely, over the latter half of that game, get 3 goals themselves, tie it up, bring to overtime, and win it with a Pierre-Luc Dubois goal. In Game 4, similarly, it would be the Blue Jackets with a 3-0 lead, this time with just 5 minutes left in the third period, and the Maple Leafs would be able to tie it up with 3 quick goals, bring it to overtime, and it would be Austin Matthews getting the power play goal to end it. And so coming into Game 5, it was a question, would we get the defensive sort of style that we got in the first couple of games, or would we maybe get the collapsing big comebacks, resiliency that we got in games 3 and 4? And in the end, it ended up being similar to Game 1, in which the Blue Jackets got the first goal of this game from Werenski, a second one from Foudy later on, and eventually a Foligno goal, sort of redemption for him as he was the one who took the penalty that led to the Austin Matthews power play goal in Game 4, and the Blue Jackets closed it out 3-0. Now, fortunately enough, it was still an eventful game, not only because of how it was played out, but also since in Games 3 and 4 there were these comebacks, you were on the edge of your seat usually for the last couple of minutes of this third period thinking, will the Leafs actually be able to come back a second time here in a row? Now, the good news here for the Blue Jackets, as they played pretty well in this game, is that they seem to just be working as a pretty decently well-oiled machine. The offense has been good. It hasn't been great, but it's been good enough to win. The defense has been very solid. Seth Jones, Zach Werenski, all real standout players. David Savard has been quite solid for them as well. And the goaltending, barring a couple of small moments of panic, I guess, from both Korpisalo and Merzlikins that were potentially somewhat costly, in the case of Merzlikins especially, it was quite solid. Outside of those moments, very, very good. And so the Blue Jackets have been looking quite good in these playoffs. The only bad news here for the Blue Jackets that I can think of is that there are some injury troubles. The question coming into today was whether or not the Blue Jackets would go with Korpisalo or would they go with Merzlikins. And in the end, they went with Korpisalo, not because they decided that that was the best choice, but it seems as though Merzlikins was apparently injured for this game. He didn't even end up backing up Korpisalo. He was sitting on the sideline. So is that something that's going to remain? Is this a serious injury? Who knows? But while Korpisalo could absolutely be the starter here for the Blue Jackets for the foreseeable future, we also have seen, as I said, both of these goalies have their struggles, and if that happens again in the next round against the Tampa Bay Lightning, who they play in the first round, Merzlikins may or may not actually be there to back him up this time. And then also the potential injuries to both Zach Werenski and Ryan Murray. Both of those players were questionable for tonight, but of course, it being the playoffs, it being Game 5 elimination game, both players did end up suiting up. But is there some sort of, injury that could be potentially aggravated further on once they play against the Tampa Bay Lightning? That would be the big question. On the side of the Maple Leafs, this game wasn't necessarily poorly played by them. In fact, really the storyline for the Maple Leafs were missed opportunities, not only because Korpisalo was quite solid in a lot of these times, but the Maple Leafs also just, for whatever reason, found themselves missing on a lot of these shots. I think the play that really epitomizes this was in the first period. John Tavares, he's got the completely wide open net. I'd say 95% of the net is just completely uncovered, and yet he somehow manages to take the shot and hit the post. And as I said, this is in the first period. If the Leafs get this goal, they get themselves on the board, and it could be a completely different game, and who knows, maybe the Leafs would have actually ended up coming out on top. But it was really a case through the first couple of periods that while there weren't a ton of Maple Leafs chances, when they did get their chances, they really made sure that they were sort of grade B or even grade A opportunities, and yet for whatever reason, they just found themselves not being able to bury it time and time again. So some decently bad bounces on the side of the Maple Leafs, but they couldn't find a way to solve Korpisalo, and they couldn't find a way to sort of solve their own issues in this game and sort of in this series as well. However, the good news for the Maple Leafs still is, of course, the future is quite bright for this team. Matthews is still, age 22 or 23. Marner, similarly as young. Nylander, similarly as young. Tavares, their oldest superstar, is, about to turn 30, which is still quite good. So they still got tons of power on the front end. Players like Morgan Rielly are still quite young on the backside. They have a couple of strong rookie defensemen also coming up, including Rasmus Sandin, as well as still a pretty solid goaltender, one of the, I would say, upper half in the league, Frederik Andersen. So things are still perfectly fine for the Leafs. Obviously, it's not great having lost the last couple of years to the Boston Bruins in the first round. You finally came into this year. You were going to face off against a team like the Blue Jackets, who are nowhere near the caliber of the Boston Bruins, or at least in my opinion aren't that close to the caliber of the Boston Bruins. And then you had an opportunity in the first round to not face off against Boston this time, and yet the Leafs somehow managed to find themselves losing once more, again in a final game, this time to the Blue Jackets. So it's a tough situation to be in, but things still looking good, and we could certainly be seeing the Maple Leafs remaining competitive for, I would say, a few years still. And of course, like every other team that has been eliminated thus far, they've got that 1 in 8 chance of actually winning the draft lottery, which would be insane for the Toronto Maple Leafs. But that will do it for these play-ins. The first round is set up. I will have a video out based on my predictions. Hopefully they'll end up going better than the predictions for the play-ins have gone, because I don't know how many of these actually got correct. Maybe 1 or 2 of them. I know the Hurricanes I had gotten correct, and maybe one other one. But we'll see how that goes. Class dismissed.